is the role of residents. We'll be talking about the experience of the accident, and the role of resident is very important. That's how we are restoring the area. So we have people involving in resident support. First, we have from National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology, Mr. Yasutaka. Thank you, Yoshida-san and Murakami-san. Good morning, everyone, and hello, and maybe good evening. I am from ICE, Yasutaka. I'm not a resident, but for this 9 years and a half, I have been active with the residents. So I made this presentation at the last year's ICRP session. Let me introduce myself. I am research targets related FDNPP accidents, like monitoring, developing, and standardizing monitoring methods, and also monitoring and evaluating environmental dynamics, and also managing and analyzing contaminated soil. So, what is most important is for monitoring and cleaning up communication to tell people the results. So from last year, I have been engaged in dialogues with various stakeholders. So today, I'm going to talk about Yamakiya district first, then I'll talk about the monitoring and communication, and then lastly, before the evacuation order was lifted, we did some activities, so I'll introduce that. So this is Yamakiya district in Kawamata town. This is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. And if you go to northwest 40 kilometers, that's the Yamakiya. In 2011 April, there was evacuation order, and 2017 March, the order was lifted. So Yamakiya is part of Kawamata town. They had 1,200 residents beforehand. So it's a mountainous area in Abukuma area. You can see flowers and the greenery, and in winter it gets very cold, like -22 degrees. There are no high mountains. It's mostly like hills. After the lifting of evacuation order, people started rice paddy field, and also festivals were resumed, and also bellflowers and anthuriums being planted or harvested. So mainly flowers are the center of restoration. Anthurium, the Kinki University is cooperating with Kawamata town. There's a huge volume of shipment. And at Tonya no Sato, they are selling anthurium. So I hope you can go and buy it. Now about communication. How do we tell people about the results of monitoring? I have some failures as well. The beginning was July 2011, 4 months after the accident. I went to Yamakiya. I was younger. Wow, I was 33. So I met with Mr. Kanno, and he was demonstrating the sunflower project. So I happened to talk to Mr. Kanno. Mr. Kanno was worried about some of the environment. So together with Chiba University, Professor Kondo and Professor Kabayashi, we promoted local agricultural promotion association. So once or 3 times per year, we held dialogues with the residents to tell them about the results of analysis. We monitored river, groundwater, stream water, and we developed monitoring devices, litter in forests, leaf, wild plants, and vegetables. They were worried, so we did this monitoring.
特に水に関しては、この井戸水を飲んでいるというわけではもともとなくてですね、
And of course, people were not drinking groundwater, they were drinking stream water. So they were very interested in the stream water results. The water monitoring, the standard is 10 becquerel per kilogram, but we only measured 0.1 becquerel. So we concentrated 2,000 liters and we came out with the becquerel. So it was only 10,000 of 10,000 of the standard. And then we compared that with the other rivers. We compared it with other areas, and we came up with a conclusion that this was very safe. And we also monitored rice, brown rice, and other vegetables. And most of the food, they were about 1/100th of the standard. However, there was some wild plants that had high dose. So there were a lot of challenges when we meeting with residents. So this was how it was held. But the residents said, oh, the lecture is sleepy, difficult, and they didn't ask questions. So it took about a year until we really recognized that our presentation was at the fault. So I'd like to make 4 suggestions when doing this kind of dialogue. One is we need an atmosphere environment where people can comment easily. The left hand side is, people become sleepy. So we should have a mixed audience, people mixing together. And before having a dialogue, maybe cooking together or engaging in agricultural work, and the residents can teach us. This was a great experience. So working together before the dialogue would be very helpful. So people can talk. And second point is understanding the interest of residents, because researchers tend to just talk about the cesium or the other things, but residents are not interested. They just want to know, so what's the concentration of rice in vegetables? So there's a big gap or disparity. So we have to understand what the residents are interested in. So we first ask them what they wanted to hear. That's how we did in second year and third year. Third point is to communicate in easy to understand. This is most difficult for experts because we just put complex figures and tables and do academic presentations. But we decided, okay, we should talk within 10 minutes because some experts talk for as long as 2 hours. And we don't use technical terms, and also use simple summary with a big font, because there are like tens or 20s of 20 people. So, and also make a summary for those who cannot attend. And fourth, so we communicate the results, but we have to hear back from the residents. So we need the feedback. So we repeated monitoring and communication. And I think residents began to understand the communication. And now we are hearing more from the residents. We have better relationships. After or when the evacuation order is almost lifted, then we found out we needed new activities. So, like there was a presentation 2 days ago, the number of people who return after the lift is not so many. About 30% of the resident would return. So, because there is a aging problem, low birth problem, and so mostly the elderly people would return. So it's difficult for them to maintain the agricultural land and facilities and maintain infrastructure. And community became sparse in population after the accident. And interaction with outside, but there's not much researchers can do. But Jack Rochelle told us that we should be at the side of the residents. So we began that activity. What did we do specifically? Um, so we became like a bridge between the residents and the outside people. Here is Mr. Kanno, here is Hirono-san, and Mr. Honda. So researchers and people and students and the residents, we came to share agriculture, learning about radiation, harvesting, gathering wild plants. We held workshops, music concerts, and international conference. So 500 people visited Yamakiya district in these 5 years. So we were engaged in like the residents would teach us, or sometimes we would teach them to do various activities. Here, Hirono Akiko made a flower arrangement using bell flowers. And these men had a great time making these arrangements. And I taught Tsukuba University students, and these students gave a folklore concert. And this is a wild chicken. So we'd cook wild chicken. And we also had dialogues with ICRP. In 2017, um, Mr. Kanno and Mr. Ohashi, they met at this session. And they began planting this flower. So there were a lot of exchanges. This year, because of COVID-19, we couldn't do so much work, but the voluntary activity is important. From last year, Fukushima University, the students, they would come to the town as part-time workers and volunteers. And also there was a student volunteer group would come and volunteer. So even if we experts cannot go, there's kind of spontaneous groups being formed. So for the future, these are phases: emergency period, environmental recovery process, social and economic recovery process. So we can't support every one of them, but we can support those that we can. And we'd like to support them in a way that they would like their future to develop. So we hope to connect through these networks. Thank you so much, Mr. Yasutaka. as a researcher, you went to this district and you heard the residents' needs and you try to communicate to them. So, those of you who have questions, please do write in your question. It will be answered in our homepage. Now, the second presentation is from the NP of Fukushima Dialogue, Mr. Takahiro Hanzawa. This is a recorded session.
Hello everyone. I am Takahiro Hanzawa of Fukushima Dialogue. But maybe you remember me better as a person from Date City Office. I'll be talking about my involvement with the residents in the dialogue. This is the slide from the first ICRP dialogue. It was 9 years ago. And at the top right-hand side is the picture of me. I'm wearing the same work clothes as I'm wearing today, and I may touch upon some of the thoughts I had at that time. Before speaking about how I got involved with a dialogue, I was working as an employee of the Date City Office. At the time of the disaster, I was working in a different section. But because of the radiation, for some reason, I was assigned, especially in the section that dealt with decontamination. And I would like to talk about that experience. And I had a lot of opportunity to talk with the residents, and I learned a lot. And I found out that there were problems that city office alone could not solve, or problems that experts alone could not solve. And there were issues that was only solvable with the participation of the local residents. This came up numerous times. And there were changes in the situation surrounding the radiation, the disaster. There were changes in the information provided. And also there were changes in the feelings of the residents. And quite recently, I was talking with a journalist from a newspaper. And he told me it was difficult at the accident when the resident could agree on the general policy but not on the details. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, they wanted to have decontamination done, but they did not want to have any temporary storage site in the backyard. And that's why we could not proceed with the decontamination. Did you think that was so at the beginning? And he said, yes, that was like that at the beginning. But I said, no, but I thought no. Because after the earthquake, there was the nuclear power plant accident and there was high radiation. And of course, decontamination needed to be done. So if I had said to residents, let's do decontamination, I thought they would agree to the decontamination. But actually, if I said, let's do decontamination, they didn't say that they wanted to do it. And I thought, why? Of course, if they were concerned that if they did decontamination, they would pile up all the radioactive material in one place. And there was also resignation that contamination will spread anyway. So even though there were quite clear evidence that it was better to do decontamination scientifically, but the residents' feelings was greater than the scientific evidence. And we failed to see this. We failed to accommodate the feelings of the residents that changed with time at first. So even though we condescendingly said we are going to do decontamination, right? But that didn't work. And so we went into the community. We held briefing sessions numerous times. And we talked to them. Since I think I talked to more people than I talked in my entire 20 years as a government employee. And then gradually one village started saying they would do decontamination, and that's how it all started. But then there were still concerns, of course, about where to have the temporary storage site and other issues. But then residents started to address these issues and their concerns and to find their own storage sites. And eventually the residents voluntarily started to take issues under their own hands, including decontamination and other recovery efforts. So 10 years have now passed, and the journalists did not remember correctly. So our memory is not reliable. And that led to Fukushima's dialogue's effort to preserve memory. Now we'll touch on this topic later. And as I mentioned earlier, since I was involved in decontamination, Professor Niwa of Kyoto University, he's also the member of ICRP committee. He suggested that I participate in ICRP dialogue. And I didn't know what ICRP dialogue was. Maybe this was going to be my first and the last time to attend. But I attended and I spoke about my experience in decontamination. And I listened to other people with different expertise and experiences. And I thought, this may be something great. And after that, I attended more than 12 dialogue sessions. And I feel grateful for the opportunity. And this dialogue then later led to the Fukushima dialogue. And what did I learn from the dialogue? There were quite many. Of course, it reminded me that the basic work of a public servant is to listen to other people. I also listened to the experts' knowledge, to the opinions of the media, and even people from overseas. This was an invaluable experience for me. Of course, there were criticisms, but through it all, there were new discoveries and insights. And in addition to that, it reminded me that there were things that only residents can do. And it made me realize how much I did not know. As a local public employee, we operate in a very small area. We know a lot about our own community, but outside of our community, we have very little access to various views. So we were like the big frogs in a little pond. In that sense, the dialogue expanded my horizons. And this dialogue was carried out by ICRP until 2015. And this is all recorded in the ICRP website and the Fukushima Dialogue's Kotoba website. And in 2015, the ICRP dialogue were changed to the Fukushima dialogue. We were working together with the local volunteers and organizing the dialogue in different sites like Iwaki and Minami Soma. But that was not enough. So in 2015, we set up the NPO Corporation Fukushima Dialogue. And we have continued with the dialogue and also on the project to preserve memory since this year. And in August 2019, we had a dialogue in Iwaki on the subject of tritium water. We had participants from the fishermen, the community building persons, the fishmongers, scientists, local organizations, and we discussed not only about the are you for or against the release of the tritium water into the ocean, but rather what are the issues at stake and how can we make things better. And we had from the participants some realistic and constructive opinions. And that went beyond the simple question of either for or against the release of the tritium water. So I felt the power and the value of the dialogue through this session and the importance of continuing with the dialogue. As I've been mentioning about our effort to preserve the memory, at each point in time we have our memory and we have the facts, but with time it fades, or with the conflicting views, our memory may change slightly, or through misunderstanding, we may form images that are different from the original facts. So I told you about the newspaper journalist. He did not have a correct memory about the facts. And because of that, in order to preserve the valuable opinions that are expressed in each dialogue, for example, the facts then at the time of 2011, the opinions in 2015 and in 2019, we needed to record all the opinions expressed at each dialogue in each point in time. So we need to record what we cannot retain in our memory. So the valuable residents' views, the residents' roles, the residents' feelings, these needed to be properly recorded. So our Fukushima Dialogue is now promoting a project to preserve past data and memory in parallel with our work to continue with the dialogue. This project is due to be completed by March next year, and when it is completed, we would like to share it with you. In addition, we are inviting people to become members of the Fukushima Dialogue. If you would like to support our organization, please access our membership website. And please do support us by becoming members. We'll be very happy. Thank you very much for listening. That was the presentation from Mr. Hanzawa about the activities of decontamination and through the ICRP dialogue and the importance of preserving the memory. Our next presenter is from students of Fukushima Prefectural High School. Ms. Sakata Nori.
Let's move on to the next presentation. The presentation by high school students of Fukushima Prefectural High School. Please start. Go ahead.
We are at Fukushima High School. We will start our presentation, Creating Our Hopeful Future from Fukushima High School. Our hometown was struck by a horrible disaster on March 11th. An earthquake caused a nuclear power plant accident at Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station. You might have heard this name before in a bad way. However, we are telling you that we are not just victims. Take a look at this picture. This is me at 6 years old, a little before the accident. When the earthquake struck, I was in school. All the children around me started crying and ran out without wearing shoes. I remember feeling scared, and my mother picked me up in the snow at a very cold playground. Even after I got home, my fear continued. When will the next earthquake come? Will my house be destroyed? Will all my friends be safe? In my house, the electricity and water broke. I couldn't sleep peace of mind until they were restored. These horrifying memories at the time of the earthquake are very vivid, and I still remember them from time to time. About 10 years have passed since this time, and we are more grown up now. Our school, Fukushima High School, has a super science club where we work together as a radiation-focused group. These are our visions for Fukushima. We want everyone to have a good impression of our city, not bad ones. We want to relieve fear for the future people of Fukushima. We want to be the big strengths of Fukushima. However, with these visions, we are conducting the following research and activities. What can we do for Fukushima? Before we started the activity, we asked ourselves these questions. After the accident, Fukushima was shunned by an informed public. It was a tough time because just talking about our native places made us afraid. Not allowed to talk about our lovely Fukushima, even confidently. We are distressed. Actually, until just recently, quite not a few people are unwilling to buy products from Fukushima because their bad impressions of Fukushima are not swept away. The biggest factor is that the current real Fukushima is largely unknown to most of society. The worst prejudice from the accident, from the time of the accident, remains strong, and it caused the people to lose interest in discovering the through Fukushima. I have no example clearly demonstrate this problem. All of the rice made in Fukushima has been inspected for radiation. Although no rice has exceeded the standard value of radiation since 2015, many people still do not trust these inspections. On the other hand, Fukushima has the largest number of top-ranked rice brands in Japan, and they are so tasty. No matter how fascinating Fukushima is, it is a pity that memories of the accident have become a barrier to experiencing the charm of our hometown. To convey the current situation and the beauty of Fukushima to the world, must know about Fukushima and enjoy it. So we are actively doing things like this. One of those is a tour of facility and disaster area. Last year, we took a bus of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. As they say, seeing is believing. To see that area with our own eyes, we could feel more responsible than even before. During that event, we also discussed the idea for what can we do for Fukushima by collaborating with high school students from other prefectures and overseas to get idea from people who live in different places helpful thinking about Fukushima's reconstructions. This photo was taken when we visit to facility area and disaster area, along with French high school students.
Another thing that we can do for our hometown to improve understanding between scientists and residents. I have an important reason. After the accident, tons of news spread all around us. Many of those stories were fake news because they shared information that had no evidence, and so people could not believe any news. It was confusing. From this experience, we learned that saying reliable information is the top priority during chaos. Scientists are not always listened because most of their jargon is too difficult for residents to understand. We saw the situation play out at the moment. Also, scientists have scientific knowledge and sometimes they lose the residential sense. We heard about this one day from the scientists. Although it has been over 10 years since the accident, sharing information, especially in the scientific field, is a serious problem. We are in the middle between the scientists and residents. So we start by becoming a conduit for communication between these two groups. I will explain the specific vision for this activity. First, because we are high school students, we want to make the best of our situation. We want to speak up as high school students, attract people's attention. We have lived in Fukushima since we are born, so we have seen very many aspects of life here. We have many friends who we met in previous events, creating connection. Even now, they invite us with opportunity to speak up about ourselves.
We talked about prejudice. However, to be honest, problem is not only prejudice. Various problems such as disposal of polluted water and difficult to return zones remain. The water remains in tank for a long time and still no one decides the final place for dispose of it. And more than a huge citizens have lost the ability to return to their homes. One of the problems is the huge amount of contaminated soil. To solve this problem, we started researching this theme. On the next slide, we will talk about our research as student scientists. Due to the accident, tons of soil with radioactive cesium needed to be cleared. Now, this soil is stuck at an interim storage facility. The government has been undecided about the best way to dispose of it and the best place for it. The discussion about disposal is conducted under the premise that there will be no leakage of cesium from soils. However, when soil contacts rainwater and seawater, the soil has a risk of leakage of cesium. Also, it needs a huge space for disposal. For this present, we have focused on pulsite. Pulsite is one kind of zeolite that can hold cesium. It is tough against pH changes, being strongly insoluble from both acidic and alkaline. We used the special process known as hydrothermosynthesis. Like a pressure cooker, the reaction can proceed while remaining liquid in a closed container even at high temperatures. However, every time hydrothermosynthesis of pulsite, a solution containing radioactive cesium is generated as a waste liquid. The purpose of this experiment is to find the best conditions for the use of waste liquid. Our research from last years has shown that the amount of cesium chloride in solution used for synthesis does not affect the number of syntheses. In future, experiments focusing on the pH values of the solution used for hydrothermosynthesis will be conducted. This is the other experiment, the leak test. This intends to prove that there is no leakage of radioactive cesium. For practical use, safety is most important. Now we are investigating the leakage of radioactive cesium by exposing pulsite to water over a long time. This is a photo of a running water experimental device. It is self-made. To help people better understand our research, it is necessary to show that there is leakage of cesium from soil and humus. As a control, similar experiments are being conducted using humus and soil. We want to talk more, but this is our last slide. We hope that this study makes Fukushima brighter. We will continue our research. This is the end of our presentation, but our challenges are not going to end here. We would like to
reiterate our promises again. We will turn our precious hometown into one of the best places in the world. We will be a ray of hope for Fukushima. We will not make anyone cry anymore. We will achieve everyone's beautiful dream. We promise. Thank you for listening.
はい、福島高校の皆様どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation of the students from the high school. Right after that, the accident and also that the management of the soil toward the future of the Fukushima. Could you introduce yourselves one by one? Could you introduce yourself briefly?
I'm Kurumi. I'm named Matsubara.
I'm Hikaru Takahashi.
I'm Higuchi Moe.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。大変素晴らしい
Thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation, I thought. Next, we would like to move on to Professor Yoshida will take over as a co-chair. Yoshida-san.
住民として相談員としてという演題で、門馬舞子様から Next, we will have Miss Maiko Monma as testimony as resident and counselor. She is a counselor in Suetsugi and she is closely involved with the residents. This is a recorded video.
住民として相談員としていわき市をつくら町に住んでいます門馬舞子と申します。
Maiko Monma. I am from Iwaki City. I will talk about when I was counselor at Suetsugi.
震災当時か
So
ら
I'll talk about 3 periods. When I was evacuated and returned to Iwaki. In 2011, March 11th, I was at home in Iwaki City with my husband and a 2-year-old son and 10-month-old daughter. At the day of the accident, our house, which was located few hundred meters from the coast, suffered damage, so we were at shelter for 5 days. And then on March 16th, we decided to voluntarily evacuate because of the Fukushima Daiichi plant accident. Our children were small. First, we went to Fukushima Prefecture, Koriyama City for 2 months. And then I and my children went back to my hometown in Sendai, and I was there for 2 years. And I consulted with my husband, and we decided to eventually return to Iwaki. And before our children entered elementary school, we returned to Iwaki.
生活についてなんですけれども、
And about voluntary evacuation, I was like a single mother, and my children were really small, and I had so much difficulty raising them. And I did not know much about the radiation. So I looked at radiation as if it was really dangerous. I was driven into a corner. I really had difficulty raising my children. So I decided to look at radiation data, not the emotional data, but I looked at the radiation dose reported by newspaper every day, and I used the Geiger counter to measure myself, and I compared the Fukushima accident with other overseas accidents, and I found out the difference between those accidents.
その後末次の相談員として
Then I'm going to talk about my activity as counselor at Suetsuki. When I returned to Iwaki, Miss Ando, who was already involved, she recruited me and I became a counselor too. From February 2015 to March 2017, Suetsugi District project to deepen people's understanding towards radiation was commissioned by Iwaki City. And then from 2017 April to 2020 March, we had a project carried out by ITOS, commissioned by the Environmental Ministry, and I became a counselor or consultant. And when I was studying myself while I was evacuated, I was lonely. But when it was decided that I'd become a counselor at Suetsuki, I was happy. I could study together with other people, and maybe I would be of use to these other people. So my work involved community center food measuring once a week. I'd look at the results of the becquerel per kilogram and I'd communicate it to the people. I told them this was just becquerel per kilogram, and I told them about the amount that they would be eating. They would be taking in their daily diet. We had an integrating dosimeter for individuals, so we did the individual monitoring as well. So I told them how to read the graph. There was Dr. Miyazaki from Fukushima Medical School, Medical University. I asked him to analyze the data, but he was not always available. So I explained to the residents. If I didn't understand something, I'd ask Dr. Miyazaki. Dr. Miyazaki devised this graph, and he put a background line that's in green, and then the red line, that's a 1 millisievert line per year. So people would easily understand that their individual dose is within those two lines.
個々の生活と個人線量がリンクすることがこのグラフを見るだけで、
You can understand by just looking at this graph your individual dose. You don't need to go through a difficult explanation. And once 3 months, I issued Suetsugi newsletter. I put out the food radiation dose, and also by issuing newsletter, people who could not listen to Dr. Miyazaki could understand the result, and they understood about the food radiation dose situation. As time went by, D shuttle individual measurement ended, so we still continued the newsletter issue and also the measurement of food dose for 5 years. And of course, the number of people who brought food for measurement, there were less people as time went on. However, people still brought vegetables and fruits, because those vegetable and food, people were attached to them. It was important for them.
活動を通して非常に印象的だったことになります。食品の放射線水準を確認することによって、
放射線 confirming the radiation dose of the food, people could become they were like reconfirming how important the food was in their daily life. And people really, I could see what the food meant for them. For example, the people who had the mikan tree, the Japanese orange tree, they wanted to send the fruit to their relatives. However, after measuring the dose, they were relieved and they said, "Oh, I will send this to my grandchildren." So people who were really concerned about radiation, I could see smiles on their face later on. And later, I interviewed people. I took about 2 hours interviewing one person. And everybody I interviewed, they had clear memory of what happened after the accident. And as for the life after they returned, they talked about their views towards life and how important the community was. They talked about the large family they had, but because of evacuation, they had fewer members, and that was lonely. And some of them said they wanted to hand down the rich nature to the next generation. And also some said that they were encouraged by young people dealing with radiation issue. So I could hear all these experiences and the recovery of these people after this accident. So what I learned through becoming a counselor, consultant, the it's meaningless to measure without hearing the person's memory or attachment to the food or how she plans to rebuild eating habits. I was always interested in those stories. So I always questioned, why does this person want to measure this food or that food? And they were really trying to build their basis of living. Second thing was I tried to be casual, I tried to be natural when talking to these people, because if I was too aggressive trying to teach these people about radiation, this would intimidate them, and I think they were not willing to ask questions. So I was determined to do this work over 10 years. And I think this kind of my stance was the reason why they accepted me. So I tried to have like housewives chat, so that people can just casually come and talk. When I wrote the newsletter, I received the topics from the residents. They were really looking forward to this newsletter. So the residents were always the main actor in our activity. We respected the will of the residents. We did not put or force our views on the residents. So we respected the residents' views, and we did not want to intrude into their daily lives. So there is a threshold, there's a barrier, like we are the experts or we are the consultant, but we try to think together about the issues. If I received question and I didn't understand the answer, I was not going to give an answer that I didn't know. I would honestly say I do not know the answer, and I would ask experts. So that kind of stance would lead to gaining confidence. Supporters are outsiders. So it's important to get the trust of the residents. And so we need to seriously deal with the issue and the residents.
と思いました。最後になりますけれども、
And last but not least, it's almost going to be 10 years since the plant accident. In 2019, EIU has compiled the experience into regaining confidence after the Fukushima accidents. And this is now you can see this on the homepage. And also, what we've been doing in Suetsugi, it's in an academic paper. ICRP's Jack Rochelle and we together wrote this paper. I didn't go into it today, but it's in the post-nuclear accident co-expertise experience of Suetsugi community in Fukushima Prefecture. What we did, the detail is in this paper. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。モマ様からは、
Thank you so much, Ms. Moma. You faced uncertainty and concern yourself, but you tried to overcome it and you were helping others as well. Thank you. Next presentation is from Minamisoma, testimony of resident from Odaka district, Miss Yuko Hirohata. It's a pre-recorded video. The committee is not something that someone creates, but something that is naturally formed. Please.
We interviewed.
南相馬市の南端に位置
Odaka
し、
is located at the southern part edge of Minamisoma, adjacent to Namie.
We interviewed
Miss Yuko Hirohata from Odaka in Minamisoma. Odaka is located at the southern edge of Minamisoma, adjacent to Namie. Before the accident, it had a population of 13,000. After the evacuation, the population went down to 0, but when the evacuation was lifted 4 years ago, it returned to 1,200, and as of September last year, it returned to 3,750. So gradually the population is growing. Ms. Horihata was born and raised in Odaka. In 2013, she launched Noratomo Farm. In 2015, she launched Odaka Platform. And in 2017, Odaka Workshop. She is working energetically for reconstruction. At the time of the disaster, she was living along the coast, and I visited the location for radiation monitoring and got to know her on her activities.
南相馬市小高のプラットフォームを2階地区に
So the evacuation was lifted, and I visited you the first time in 2015 in January. And at that time, the evacuation order was not lifted. And there was still the effect of tsunami.
震災時のことをお伺いいたしました。広畑さん。
Mrs. Hirata, can you tell us your story about the earthquake? Yes, a day of the disaster, I will talk about that. It was 2:46, the first time. I was told that your phone is ringing. And that was actually the earthquake alert on my cell phone. And I was holding onto my PC, holding onto the wall, and I was on my knees. And then it settled down. And everybody's okay, let's evacuate. But at that time, I was living in Okuma, and Odaka is 30 minutes away. And at that time, my son was to return to the house between 2:30 and 3, and I was thinking about him. So I decided to go back to home, not to evacuate. And because I'm an impatient person, I decided to take the road near the nuclear power plant, which will take 20 minutes to the house. But the road was congested because everyone was thinking the same thing. And it was congested, and therefore I went on to the next crossing, but then it was also congested. And I thought I would take the National Expressway, but there was about a 40-centimeter crack on the road, so I couldn't pass. So I took the mountain road on my way to Odaka, and I drove by, and there were sometimes congestions, and I arrived at Namie, which is quite close to my house. And then my house is 500 meters from the sea, so I'd have to go back to the National Expressway. And I drove about 1 kilometer, and I looked at the sea, and I felt that something was wrong. But I didn't know what it was. And I was so much concerned about my son's whereabouts. And I went on another 1 kilometer. I was surrounded by tsunami. And I thought, well, what is this? And the water was still shallow, and the person at the gas station said, you can't pass that way. But, I really had to go back. Where is my son? And therefore I took the uphill road and reached 200 meters from my house. And then I looked at my house was still there, and that was 3:46. And 3:46 was a time when the biggest tsunami arrived at our location, and it had swept all the houses in the nearby neighborhood areas. And I walked for about 200 meters, and what I saw was undescribable. It was very cruel and sad. And I thought that I might never see my son again. And I was praying to myself, and I felt totally helpless. And then I entered my house, and the water was in my house. And then in the entrance, my son was there in the entrance. He came out of the entrance. And he said, hello. And I was so relieved. And he said, please go pay 3,000 yen. I didn't know what he was saying. My son actually in the morning he had a punctured tire on his bicycle and he was late for school and he was scolded by the teacher. But the teacher said to him, you have a puncture in the bicycle, you can leave early and go home. And so he went home earlier, and that's why he was alive. He was by the house by 2 o'clock. And because I was impatient and traveling all over the place, and because he had a punctured tire, and because of these reasons, both of us were alive. And we are simply lucky. So there's still hope as long as we are alive. That's what I felt. So when I visited you, your house is at a higher location, and you showed me how high the tsunami reached. And after the evacuation order was lifted, then in Odaka and as well as in elsewhere, the urbanscape really changed because of the demolition of houses and so forth. And you already, when I visited you first, you were living in a Kashima temporary houses, and you had leased a farm to start up a Naratomu farm. And this Naratomu farm then became Odaka platform, and then today you have the Odaka workshop. So can you tell us about this? Yes, I thought I understood what was the important thing in life because of the disaster. So I resigned from my company that I was working for. And next to our temporary house, I leased a plot of land and decided to become a farmer. And using the retirement allowance from the company, I used all the money to build a greenhouse and to make a better use of my time. So you had no experience of farming. That's right. Well, I thought if I see the information in the internet, I can do it. Well, I've seen how it was done, so I thought I could do it. And you started with the flowers, right? So with food and vegetables, that would be difficult because of the radiation and the shipment. And that's why you chose flowers? Yes, so with other people living in temporary housing, I was talking with him and he said, how about vegetables? And he said, vegetables, maybe not, because of the radiation. And what about flowers? And he said, oh, that would be good. And that's why we decided to grow flowers. So from then you launched the Odaka platform. Well, these are done by the people living with the temporary housing. No, that's not so. So I was planting flowers in my garden or in other places in the town. And then you became a representative of an organization for protecting Odaka. Yes, that's right. So I was planting flowers in all over the place, and then people started to talking to me. So that's how kind of build up a network. And today, in 2017, you launched Odaka Workshop, and you're growing red chili or chili oil, and you're selling it as products. Why did you choose chili? So I was
植えていって
planting
人が増え
flowers
て
and we had networks of people.
植えて帰
But,
ると
they,
いろんなとこ帰ってやって
but
も
even then,
帰ってそしてまた
I
戻って
was
きてって
traveling back and forth.
私誰に
But
も会わない
then
日が
there were
あ
days
っ
I
て
didn't meet anyone.
この人たちみんなど
And
こに行
where
った
did all the people go? There was nobody to talk to, but there was maybe
一
only
人
one
の
or two people that I met.
私ここにいるん
So
だけど誰か見
can
つけてく
somebody
れよ
find me?
そこから小高プラ
And
ット
that's how I launched the Odaka platform.
自分が寂
So I
しい
think I wanted to meet people. It was not really for some other people. I think I wanted to meet people.
はいそしてそこから
So
そこに作ってそこで
we
最後
have a salon
話し合われいろんなことを
and
話すよう
we
になると
talked with different people.
2016
And
年
in 2016,
帰ってきたはいいけれども
people were saying that
帰ってき
we
たはいい
came
けれ
back
ど
to
も
this area,
白菜
but monkeys took my cabbage. We started talking things like that. The civets ate all the corn.
そういうことが小高プラットフォームの中で
And
話
this
さ
kind
れるよ
of talk we had at the salon and the whiteboards, right? Yes, they dug up the potatoes.
唐辛子は大丈
So chili, okay,
はい
no
そ
damage.
の小高の人っていうかみん
Yes,
な
most people in Odaka, they usually grow chili trees, maybe one or two,
植えてますね自分ちで
for their own
作るために
consumption.
だけどもその唐辛
But
子をやら
there
れ
were
た
no
っていう
talk
人
about damage done to the chili.
唐辛子
And that's why you started with chili.
大丈夫なんじゃ
Yeah,
ない
so that I thought chili would be safe to grow. And at first, there were three of us. We used 15 seedlings. We kind of tested how we went.
はいここから
And
200本
then we grew 200 chili.
それを町の
And
復興祭
we
行ってみ
sold
たら
at the reconstruction fair.
みんなが注目して
And
俺一本しか買わない
and some people, normally people buy only one or two chili, but some people bought 5 or 6 and said they were going to distribute them to friends. And the next year, we had 60 people apply
参加して
who
くれて
participated. And so gradually, it kind of expanded.
次の年もう
And the following year, we took applications. And I was expecting to have about 60, but then it was half.
よく見たら俺
That
キュウリ
was because some people went to grow cucumbers instead. And so, starting with the chili community, they would expand into other produce. So, Odaka workshop was the first step.
とお前の唐辛
So,
子どうな
some people still ask me, how's your chili? And this chili community expanded.
この人が集まってのやっぱり
So, this kind of became a common topic for conversation.
311からの共通の話題っていうの
After the
が考えて
accident, if I look back,
避難した
the
避難の経路
the topic we used to talk about was which route we took to evacuate.
新たに唐辛子
But now we have different things to talk about, such as chili, and what we talk about is now
い
changing.
ろんなところでコミュニティ再生
So
とか
we
そう
do
いう
hear a lot of stories about community rebuilding,
今と考
and
えて
what
る
I'm
のは
thinking,
考えて思ってる感じて
my
る
feeling is, what is community?
中にやっぱり
And
一人でに誰かが作ったもののコミュニティ
it
に
was
入って
very
くる
difficult during evacuation to enter into other communities.
今そういうふうに少し
But
ずつ
now,
少し
gradually,
人が集まってい
people
る
come
自然
together. This is kind of spontaneous. And I think this is about community, is something that grows out spontaneously. Thank you very much.
広畑さんからのメッセー
This
ジ
is a message from Mrs.
津波
Hirohata.
にあった
We experienced
津波
tsunami. My family experienced
体
tsunami.
験をお持ちの方は
There
聞
are
い
a
て
lot
ま
of
し
people who have listened to her voice, including
生きていれ
myself.
ばなんとか
She
なる
said there's hope as long as we are
そういう
alive.
気持ちが
And I think
未来
this
に
feeling, this strong
残る
feeling,
力と
is
なってい
the
ると感じま
energy
した
for recovery.
広畑さんの活動については
As for
こちら
her
も合わせてご覧ください
activities, you can find them at this website.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは
Thank you very much. We would like to go to the last presenter.
Now we will move on to the last presentation. The Odaka Minami Soma, that the order was lifted and they are at the phase of moving forward. But on the other hand, that the residents of the hard-to-return area have to remain in the evacuated place. And I interviewed one of such people from the Namie Township. The testimony of an evacuee from the difficult-to-return areas, Mr. Saito, is the leader of the residents, and I interviewed him. Please watch the pre-recorded video. Here, that I would like to hear the testimony of Mr. Saito, the ward office leader of that Hatagawa district. March 11th, 2011. Excuse me, 17. That the order was lifted. But the blue area, the people can return. However, many other areas is designated as hard to return. So many people refrain from coming back. And so that Hatagawa-san's home is right here. He is in Otawara village. It's a red area so that he cannot return. And Saito-san is very interested in radiation dosage, so that I visited his place number of the times for interview. I cannot hear the Japanese. The translator cannot hear the Japanese.
ここでは
Here,
それではさから
田川地区の何度か通っております。
I commuted to this place number of the times to interview him. Sorry, the translator cannot hear the Japanese.
ここではい取りなどついてで事故り第一原型それでは早速
の乗客私
吉田です。
Again, the same thing. The translator cannot hear the Japanese. After the accident of the nuclear plant, and in October, 9 years and 7 months has passed. And what was a livelihood? Before the accident, it was almost 10 years ago. Mr. Saito, could you describe your life before the accident? Very well, ma'am. I was working for a plant 70 kilometers away from my home. And on the holiday that we caught that the cherry salmons because that the restriction lifted on the 1st of April and harvested the edible wild plant. And in the autumn that I harvested the pine mushrooms. During the winter that we gathered the logs for 1 year worth of the stoves I used. Now, after the accident, 9 years and a half, could you explain how you spent the 9.5 years? Evacuation. First of all, on the 12th of March, I left. And I live in Otama Township. I had to move 8 times. 8 times, you mean? Yes, 8 times I have to move the location. What was your first shelter? Tsushima, in line with the policy of the township. But it was filled up because of it was in evening. I went to Katsurao. My relatives accepted us 2 nights. And afterwards, and you had to move again? Yes, from the Katsurao village that the evacuation order was issued because it was within the radius of 30 kilometers. And I took a shelter into the gym of that, at the outside of the 30 kilometers away of the school gym. And the condition was so dire. So several days later that I moved to Tokyo and started to live with my younger sister. That was the 19th of March, 2011. Now, Mr. Saito, you have been the ward mayor of the Hatagawa district. and of the Namie Township that you have been engaging in this responsibility. And are you committing to the Hatagawa district from your temporary home to Hatagawa? Go ahead, sir. Yes, 3-4 times a month I commute to my former home. Last year, that the typhoon number 19 devastated this area and disrupted many roads around and inside of the Fukushima prefecture. And I called you and I tried to inquire after your safety. And what was the time that you received my phone call? I tried to check the condition of the roads, and I went to the Katsurao and looked around, and I could see that the major landslide disrupting the roads, so that I had to make a detour to Ogaki Dam, and it was the same thing. The roads system was devastated, and so from there, that I had to walk all the way to our home for the observation. From the Ogaki Dam, that I have to cover 15 kilometers on foot. And I had to go through that fallen trees and landslide areas that took me 2 hours and a half. And the roads are so devastated enough not to allow the cars. Next day, from the Katsurao side, I tried to check the condition of the roads passage. On 1780 kilometers I had to cover. Again, this road was devastated and it was impossible at that time to pass by a car. In April 2018, I visited Hatagawa for the first time and later several times. The last year also that I visited the Hatagawa district. That from the Ogaki Dam, that is the only access gateway. And the prefecture road down east, I believe it is still impossible. No, ma'am. You have the access from both sides. But after the typhoon, that we asked the town government, and clear the road, whichever the side. And in 2 weeks later, that the road was clear. So from the Ogaki Dam that you can enter the Hatagawa, is that the case? No. There is the road construction. Renovation construction is going. That's why that we cannot go through. From the Katsurao side that you can pass through the prefecture road. So the commuting itself is rather difficult. I understand listening to you. Now, and when I visited you 2018 and last year as well, and we went close to your home in Hatagawa, and we measured the radiation inside and outside around your home very meticulously. And the atmospheric radiation last year is outside of the home that I measured several times. The average was 0.06 microsievert per hour. Inside of the house, and we measured all the rooms, and the average 0.28 microsievert per hour. So this is significant decline from the first time we measured. Against this backdrop, that the designation of hard to return area continues. That means your house is outside of the designated special area for the rehabilitation of recovery. So against this backdrop, as a ward leader, has been that the facilitators of the district, what is your frank idea and opinions right now? Nearly 10 years has passed, And when the business as usual continues, that you see that the village will be absorbed in the forest and disappear. That's my fear. But somehow, whatever that the format may be, we would like to improve the situation to the best I can. Whatever the format you mean is, for example, your house, at the back of your house, there are the clear streams and Japanese wasabi horseradish, or that the edible wild plants. And these are the blessing of the mountains that you enjoyed. Harvesting the wildlife and you enjoyed, however, that you are so far away from this kind of the life in the past.
今後、いつ、どういうふうになる
So into the future, when and how that you can, if it is possible, you can return and reconstruct a life that you have no idea. But nonetheless, do you have any hope or vision, or as a duty of the ward leader, district leader, what is your outlook into the future, or your hope or vision? That's a tough question to answer. But the edible wild plant, a part of them are low in dosage. So that we can probably cultivate the edible wild plant in their homes, the farms, not inside of the mountains. And Takasegawa Brook used to be that the resource of the tourism, and so that we can revive the plan, I think. And taking advantage of this, I would like to contribute to that, to return to the past. Roads are passable, and for beautiful the seasons, and the edible food and the plants can be harvested, mushrooms from the mountain. Well, some of the residents gave up to return, but we can probably invite the new people are interested in the life like this of this remote area, but beautiful area with a rich nature. We would like to introduce them so that we can clear the past for the future, so that the newcomers and also that the residents can be our successors to grow that the community somehow into the future is my hope. Okay, listening to you from now on, 3 years to come, 5 years to come, more specific plan for recovery or purpose of the aims. If you have the visible, that more clear vision, I think that you can be very much motivated. However, already the 10 years has passed and looking at the current status. So my guess is that specific plan and roadblocks for the development of the future. Do you have any concept or thinking? We have to, well, group together for that local residents and, well, to revive the plan of the Takase stream as a tourist attraction. But many people are aging, so that we cannot consider us in 10 years' time, but 5 years' time, probably that we can help or revival of the tourist development plan for gathering all the people or unite the people. Yeah, you were already the district leader at the time of the accident. So how many years have you been working as a well, I have been the ward leader since 2012. And 2011, where when I was just to submit the paper of taking over. Oh yes, so right at the time or right after the accident, you became the leader of the ward. Oh yes, that There was no administrative activities at township in 2011, so I have been the ward leader since 2012, so this is my 9th year to be the ward leader. Thank you very much. This is going to be my concluding question. Saito-san, your feeling and opinions, do you think that it can be communicated to the other people?
なかなか難しいですね。
That's difficult. Even though that the one ward leader of one section of the return to hard to return area speak up, it's not very communicable. And the environment minister says that radiation is down by 70%. Okay, that they have to bring up the measures which is suitable for the 70% down, but it is slow to come. Thank you very much. Through this video, I think that I can communicate your opinion to all over Japan and in the world. Thank you very much, Mr. Saito, for your time. This concludes the 3 presentations, and I would like to summarize briefly. ICRP conference has been asked that many people of the different the position to speak up, and the last section is that the residents, high school students, and those people who are very close to residents are the presenters. Chernobyl, Fukushima. After the accident, for the residents, the most important is to back to the daily life and to increase the quality of the life, and into the future, what will be that the future lifestyle preferred. They would like to continue thinking about this, and this is the most important role of the residents, in my opinion. Now, today, from this session, scientific data science, of course, is very important and essential, but on the other hand, these are the baselines. And for the radiation protection, the role of this is not only from the scientific aspect, but we have to include the livelihood and the social side of the people and support them. And that's what I have learned from this presentation. Thank you very much for the presenters and participants. My heartfelt gratitude to all of you. And Dr. Murakami, with your permission, I would like to close this session.